Over time, the strategy began to work. Southeast Asia entered a new period of economic growth. Singapore experienced one of the most dramatic transformations. Under Lee Kuan Yew, the small island nation became a global center for trade, finance, and technology. The government invested heavily in education, housing, infrastructure, and public safety. Its methods were strict, but the results were extraordinary. Thailand and Malaysia also industrialized rapidly. Factories expanded, exports increased, and millions of people moved from rural villages into growing cities. Vietnam followed a different path. After years of war and economic isolation, the government introduced the Doi Moi reforms in 1986. The country remained under one-party rule, but it began to accept market principles and foreign investment. The transformation was remarkable. Poverty fell dramatically. Factories appeared across the country, and Vietnam became a major part of the global supply chain. Cities such as Jakarta, Bangkok, and Ho Chi Minh City grew at breathtaking speed. New highways crossed the landscape, ports expanded, glass towers rose above neighborhoods that had once been farmland. ASEAN eventually expanded across most of Southeast Asia. Together, its member states created an economic bloc worth more than $3 trillion. But Southeast Asia is not a utopia. The region still faces enormous challenges. It now stands between two great powers, the United States and a rising China. The South China Sea has become one of the most dangerous areas of tension. China claims control over large parts of the sea. Those claims overlap with areas claimed by Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and other nations. Military ships patrol the waters. Artificial islands have been built, and every confrontation carries the risk of a larger conflict. Myanmar faces an even deeper crisis. In 2021, the military seized power in a coup. The country descended into civil war. Thousands were killed, millions were forced from their homes, and hopes for democracy were pushed aside once again. Authoritarian governments remain powerful in several countries. Censorship, corruption, and political repression continue to shape daily life. Economic growth has also created deep inequality. Modern skyscrapers rise above crowded neighborhoods. Millions of workers produce goods for global companies, but many still work for low wages and with little protection. Then there is climate change. Southeast Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions in the world. Rising sea levels threaten coastal cities such as Jakarta and Manila. Stronger storms strike the Philippines. Flooding and saltwater intrusion threaten farms across the Mekong Delta. For millions of people, climate change is not a distant danger. It is already here, and yet, if history has proven anything, it is this. Southeast Asia knows how to survive. The region survived colonial rule, Japanese occupation, revolution, civil war, dictatorship, and economic crisis. It has been shaped by foreign empires, but it has never been defined by them. Today, the 11 nations of Southeast Asia are not simply watching the 21st century unfold. They are helping to shape it. The future will not be easy. It will be complicated, uncertain, and sometimes dangerous. But it will also be vibrant, powerful, and unmistakably Southeast Asian. Look at a world map. Your eyes may pass over Southeast Asia without a second thought, but this region is home to more than 700 million people, 11 nations, hundreds of languages, and a history that has shaped the modern world. Behind the shining cities and tropical coastlets lies a story of survival, a story of colonial rule, war, revolution, and one of the most remarkable economic transformations of the modern era. For more than 400 years, powerful empires fought to control this region. Then came the bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century. Yet somehow, Southeast Asia survived, and today it is becoming one of the most important economic regions in the world. This is the story of Southeast Asia. In the 16th century, European merchants became obsessed with spices, nutmeg, cloves, mace. In Europe, These spices could be worth more than gold, and many of them came from a small group of islands in what is now Indonesia. The race to control the spice trade had begun. In 1511, the Portuguese captured Malacca. The city controlled one of the most important shipping routes in the world. Soon, the Spanish claimed the Philippines. They named the islands after King Philip II of Spain. Then came the Dutch. In 1602, they created the Dutch East India Company. It became one of the world's first multinational corporations. The company built a powerful trade empire across Indonesia. Its goal was simple: control the spice trade, destroy the competition, and make enormous profits. The British expanded into Malaya and Burma. The French took control of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Together, these territories became known as French Indochina. The colonial powers built railways, ports, and plantations. But these projects were not created for the local people. They were designed to move rubber, tin, rice, and other resources to foreign markets. Traditional systems of power were dismantled, local economies were transformed, and European laws were imposed on millions of people. But one country escaped direct colonial rule: Siam, the nation we now call Thailand. Its kings carefully balanced the British and French empires against each other. They modernized the country, they reformed the government, and they gave up some territory to protect the nation's independence. Siam became a buffer between the British and French colonies. It was a remarkable act of diplomacy. But across the rest of Southeast Asia, resentment continued to grow. Colonial economies created wealth for foreign powers. For local people, they often brought poverty, inequality, and exploitation. Then a global catastrophe changed everything. In late 1941, Japanese forces swept across Southeast Asia. European colonies collapsed with astonishing speed. In 1942, Singapore fell to Japan. The British had called it an unbeatable fortress. Its surrender shocked the world. Japan claimed that it had come to liberate Asia from Western rule. It promoted a vision known as the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. But the promise of liberation quickly disappeared. The occupation was brutal. Food and resources were taken for the Japanese war effort. Millions of people faced hunger, violence, and forced labor. Thousands died while building the Burma Railway. It became known as the Death Railway. Yet the Japanese occupation also destroyed something that European colonialism depended on: the belief that white empires were invincible. For generations, colonial governments had presented European power as permanent. Japan shattered that illusion in a matter of months. The occupation also gave local nationalist leaders valuable experience. Some were given weapons, some received military training. Others learned how to organize governments and resistance movements. In Indonesia, Sukarno worked with the Japanese while preparing for independence. In Burma, Aung San first cooperated with Japan. Later, he turned against the occupation. When Japan surrendered in August of 1945, a power vacuum appeared across Southeast Asia. European governments expected to return. But the region had changed. Nationalist movements were ready, and they were no longer willing to accept colonial rule. On August 17, 1945, Sukarno declared Indonesia independent. The Dutch tried to reclaim their former colony. A brutal 4-year war followed. Indonesian fighters resisted Dutch forces across the islands. International pressure continued to grow. Finally, in 1949, the Netherlands recognized Indonesian independence. In Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh also declared independence. He quoted words from the American Declaration of Independence: "All men are created equal," but France refused to surrender its colony. The result was the First Indochina War. The conflict ended in 1954. French forces suffered a devastating defeat at Dien Bien Phu. Other nations followed their own paths to freedom. The Philippines became independent in 1946. Burma became independent in 1948. Cambodia and Laos gained independence in 1953. Malaya became independent in 1957. It later joined with other territories to form Malaysia. Singapore became part of Malaysia in 1963. But the union did not last. 2 years later, Singapore was expelled. Its leader, Lee Kuan Yew, wept on television as he announced the separation. Independence had finally arrived across most of Southeast Asia, but freedom did not bring peace. The new nations inherited borders created by colonial powers. These borders often divided ethnic groups and forced old rivals into the same countries. Governments were fragile, economies were weak, and a new global conflict was already spreading across the region. The Cold War had begun. During the Cold War, Southeast Asia became a giant political chessboard. The United States feared that communism would spread from one country to the next. This idea became known as the domino theory. If one nation fell, American leaders believed the others would soon follow. That fear helped pull the United States deeper into Vietnam. The Vietnam War became one of the most destructive conflicts of the 20th century. Millions of Vietnamese people were killed. The fighting also spread into Laos and Cambodia. The United States dropped an enormous number of bombs on Laos. Many failed to explode. Decades later, unexploded bombs still threaten local communities. But Vietnam was not the only country torn apart by the Cold War. In Indonesia, a failed coup took place in 1965. The military blamed the Communist Party. What followed was a campaign of mass violence. Between 500,000 and 1 million people were killed. Many of the victims were accused of being communists. Others were targeted because of their ethnicity or political beliefs. General Suharto rose to power. He ruled Indonesia for more than 3 decades. His government brought stability and economic growth, but it also relied on military power, censorship, and political repression. In Cambodia, the consequences were even more horrifying. The Khmer Rouge seized power in 1975. Its leader, Pol Pot, attempted to transform Cambodia into a rural communist society. Cities were emptied, families were separated, money was abolished. Millions of people were forced to work in the countryside. Those who resisted were executed. Many more died from hunger, disease, and exhaustion. By the time the Khmer Rouge regime fell in 1979, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population had died. Across Southeast Asia, the young nations were being tested. Wars, coups, dictatorships, insurgencies, and political violence threatened to tear the region apart. But in the middle of this chaos, something important happened. In 1967, 5 countries came together: Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. They created the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, better known as ASEAN. At first, many people doubted that the organization would survive. Its members had different political systems, different cultures, different religions, and in some cases, a history of conflict with one another. But ASEAN was built on a simple principle. Its members would respect each other's sovereignty. They would avoid interfering in each other's internal affairs, and they would settle their disputes through dialogue. ASEAN was not designed to become a European-style superstate. It was a practical agreement. Prevent another regional war, build trust, and create the conditions for economic growth.